Run. It was all the researcher could do, running as fast as his puny legs would carry him, down a hallway that once had been familiar, and now was anything but. Tiles in the ground were displaced, with grass and moss and ancient shrubbery growing out from underneath. The air, once keenly sterilized and climate-controlled to keep out anomalous pathogens, was instead thick, humid, and soupy with a combination of Cretaceous chemicals. The air buzzed with insects that hadn't been seen for millions of years. But when the researcher hit a dead end at the hallway's terminus, all of this was the last thing on his mind. He was much more focused on the huge figure lumbering towards him in the dark, a perfect predator, hundreds of millions of years in the making, eyes narrowing on its human prey. And it wasn't even one of the countless anomalous specimens that SCP Foundation researchers were used to breaking containment and causing havoc everywhere. It was, instead, a mature female Tyrannosaurus Rex, one of the most dangerous dinosaurs ever to have lived. The bad news for the SCP Foundation is that it's far from the only ancient throwback that had been unleashed onto the unfortunate employees of the anomaly-fighting organization. In addition to all of these new dinosaur threats, there was one terrible creature, one mutant mistake, that never should have existed in the first place. The researcher backed into the corner and could only scream with terror as the T-Rex roared and lunged forth, her jaws open and drooling, and ate the unfortunate man alive. But he'll be far from the only one meeting a sticky end today. How, you might ask, did this happen? How did a Foundation containment site become a deadly playground for creatures that should have been extinct for millions of years? As it turns out, the disaster all started with a faulty Scranton reality anchor. These devices were lifesavers for the SCP Foundation when dealing with anomalies of a reality-warping nature. They suppressed the Hume level of their general area, keeping things from getting too strange. But when one of these anchors started malfunctioning, it sadly had the opposite effect. Localized reality, specifically the reality around the Foundation containment site, folded, causing it to collide with the same geographical location in a different universe. And in this other universe, a genetic engineering company known as InGen had made some terrible mistakes. They'd used advanced cloning techniques to bring dinosaurs back to life, all in the hopes of making them the stars of a theme park unlike anything ever seen before, Jurassic Park. However, things went terribly wrong before the park was even open. Multiple containment failures led to a number of deaths from rogue escaped dinosaurs, and as a result, most of these scaly genetic mistakes were left abandoned on equatorial islands owned by the company. There, InGen hoped they would never harm any humans ever again, until it spliced with this new reality, and a new wave of horrors began. In the containment site's break room, a Pachycephalosaurus was rampaging, using its tough bone helmet to defensively charge into any Foundation guards who tried to apprehend it. The beast was not a carnivore, like some of the other dinosaurs loose in the site, but it was highly territorial and not afraid to throw its weight around. Soon enough, the guards were able to barricade it in the room, propping up furniture against the doors from outside. However, just when it seemed that those guards had the situation under control, they saw a rampaging Triceratops running down the hall towards them. They had no hope of stunning the dinosaur with cattle prods, or even hoping to pierce its thick hide with tranquilizer darts. All they could do was turn and run, taking tight corners in hopes of avoiding a horrific death by trampling. But they were running directly towards another threat in process. As they turned a corner to escape the Triceratops, they saw SCP-082, Ferdinand the Cannibal, a gigantic tough-as-nails monster man who could tear through people like you'd tear through a meatball sub. He wasn't always dangerous to everyone he ran into, but with his unpredictable nature, wild fantasies, and pathological lying, approaching him was always a gamble. You could be walking into a conversation or running straight towards your death. Oh, and also in this particular scenario, he was dressed in a safari outfit and was doing a particularly atrocious attempt at an Australian accent.
"Crikey, mate! That's one hell of a croc out there!"
he said as the Triceratops charged in.
"Thankfully, you've got me, Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, on the case, mate."
He grabbed the Triceratops by the horns and wrestled it to the ground, trying to keep the monster still with his huge hands. While holding the beast in place, he thrust his hand through the wall, ripping out a tangle of wires. Without hesitation, he began hog-tying the Triceratops' legs, wrapping the cables tightly around its thrashing limbs. Elsewhere in the site, chaos still reigned. A vicious swarm of Dilophosauruses were hunting down and attacking researchers, spitting their venom into their eyes before leaping in for the kill. It was a particularly gruesome way to die, even as getting eaten by dinosaurs goes. However, as you've already seen with the surprise heroic intrusion of Ferdinand the Cannibal, Steve Irwin the Crocodile Hunter, the reality splicing incident had also caused a number of containment breaches across the site, leading to a number of confrontations between anomaly and dinosaur. As Dilophosauruses picked and chewed at their subdued prey, they suddenly heard some distinctive calls exactly like their own. Strange. In that same moment, they also found that their thinking became strangely foggy. Why were they here? Was there something they were forgetting? Even in their own basic instinctual minds, they felt the strange lack. That's because these predators were about to become prey for creatures far more strange, dangerous, and unnatural. SCP-939 with many voices. These are some of the most nightmarish creatures that the Foundation had ever encountered. Highly intelligent, pack-hunting monsters with crimson flesh and long needle-like teeth. Their bodies constantly emitted an amnestic gas, erasing fragments of memory from anyone exposed. Victims would unknowingly wander back into the hunting grounds where the 939 specimens lay in wait, ready to turn them into prey once again. But that's not their only dangerous capability. They're also capable of perfectly imitating the voices or cadences of anything they desire, human or otherwise. By approaching silently and then imitating the Dilophosaurus' calls, they were able to slowly surround them. Before pouncing, they sank their fangs into the helpless dinosaurs, targeting the weak points, arteries, and veins with brutal precision. The attack was merciless and overwhelming, leaving the prey no chance to fight back against the relentless onslaught. And these weren't the only ancient beasts potentially meeting their match against an anomaly already lurking in the Foundation's clutches. But not all of them were evil, like the voice-imitating abominations devouring the Dilophosauruses. Over in the Foundation archives, long halls of filing cabinets and air-conditioned safes and document containers, another pack of intelligent predators were on the hunt. As archivists tried to find their way to a nearby safe room, they saw shadows moving in the dark, flashes of eyes and claws, skulking, hunting. The archivists dared not make a sound, but they sensed that it wouldn't make any difference. The creatures in the stacks already knew that they were here, already knew that they were helpless. It seemed almost like they were enjoying the hunt. Hoping to find strength in numbers, they grouped together and made a charge towards the exit, and that's when the creatures struck. Velociraptors, some of the most intelligent and ferocious hunters that InGen had ever engineered. They came out charging towards the archivists, ready to kill them and devour their flesh, until huge green spines flying like arrows struck the raptors, stunning them and giving them a moment of pause. That's when an unconventional hero stepped out of the darkness. Daniel McIntyre, a Scottish man also known as SCP-2800, Cactus Man. Two things were remarkable about this man. One, that he suffered from what psychologists called a hero complex, a desire to act in a heroic manner for others even if it puts him in danger. And two, he's made of cactus, and has all the abilities that would give a person.
Better clear off, lads,
he said to the archivists while squaring up against the raptors.
I'll buy you some time. These fellas don't look like herbivores.
As the archivists ran on, the raptors engaged, as McIntyre did whatever he could to fight them back with his spiky body. He may not have had super strength or the ability to fly, but in his green chest undeniably beat the heart of a true champion. Oh, and speaking of hearts, in Containment Block 3, the Indoraptor prowled, a monstrosity never meant for nature, engineered entirely by Dr. Henry Wu for one purpose: military domination. As such, it was one of the most intelligent dinosaur-inspired creatures that had ever existed, with even more combat potential than its predecessor, the infamous Indominus Rex. And it had proved its ferocity yet again by hunting down and slaughtering researchers and containment specialists. As it stalked forward, it gnawed on the corpse of a senior guard the way you or I might casually eat a hot dog at a county fair, its long articulated claws gripping the mangled remains with eerie precision. Surely, this was the apex predator, a creature so unnatural, so lethal, that nothing else in the facility could match its unpredictability and sheer terror. Nothing, or so it seemed. And that's when SCP-058 ran in. Dinosaurs are undeniably frightening to encounter, but something like 058, appropriately nicknamed the Heart of Darkness, is like something that crawled straight out of your deepest, darkest nightmare. A huge pulsing heart existing in the middle of a network of chittering insect legs, whipping bladed tendrils, and spouts that fired out gouts of flammable acid. Left unattended, it was capable of destroying entire cities, and seemed to be impossible to kill, even with the Foundation's advanced weaponry. And while the Indoraptor lacked the cognitive capability to fully grasp its own madness, it constantly spewed twisted, incoherent words, a nightmarish babble that, if heard for too long, could drive a human being to the brink of insanity. Before the Indoraptor could even process what its genetically engineered eyes were seeing, the heart was already upon it, bladed tendrils slashing, monstrous insect legs clawing for a foothold. The Indoraptor lashed out, razor-sharp claws slicing through the air, but the attacks barely left a mark. The anomaly's leathery flesh was unnaturally tough, absorbing each blow without flinching. For the first time in its existence, the weaponized dinosaur had met something it couldn't tear apart. Soon, more and more flammable acid coated the Indoraptor, setting it on fire and melting away its body. A monster that took so many years to develop would meet its end in minutes. Outside the facility, other Foundation containment sites nearby were trying to understand exactly what was going on. They were tapping into CCTV cameras and webcams within the facility to try to get a sense of what was occurring in the danger zone. Which dinosaurs were trapped inside the base? Which anomalies had escaped their containment? How many survivors were still inside? And what resources they could deploy to somehow get this situation under control. Thankfully, Foundation paleontology experts were able to identify most of the dinosaurs they were dealing with, except for one remaining outlier. An anomaly, you might even say. It was a huge, many-legged beast, its cranium wide and flat, with huge, fang-lined jaws underneath. It didn't match any dinosaurs on the record. It could only be some kind of mutant reject, some terrible monster created by InGen while on their quest to make aesthetically perfect dinosaurs. It was neither a real dinosaur nor some weaponized portmanteau. It was a dark and hidden mistake, and now it was rampaging through the Foundation's halls, large enough that it could simply grab and devour fleeing personnel whole. Soon enough, it was given a nickname and classification, the D-Rex. Even as guards opened fire on it with small arms, it didn't seem to have any meaningful effect on the monster. No, this was going to need to be another case of monster versus monster if they wanted to bring the D-Rex down, while there were still survivors still inside the building. The D-Rex smashed through nearby walls, using its extra arms to grab up and capture people who would have otherwise been able to escape from a more conventional dinosaur. It was a threat so horrifying that for some, it even recalled the experience of being trapped inside the building during an SCP-682 containment breach. The outside observers felt helpless, simply watching in horror as they slaughtered its way through its prey. But just when the situation seemed the most hopeless, another combatant flew in. A huge female T-Rex, fangs still wet with the blood of other researchers, lunged in and clamped its jaws around the D-Rex, forcing it off balance. Being almost as large as the D-Rex, the T-Rex was able to hold its own, relentlessly chomping into the mutant's thick hide. But the strangest thing was that, according to all the footage of the initial dimensional splice, a T-Rex hadn't traveled over with the rest of the dinosaurs. This had to somehow be something different. And it turns out this was because this Rexy wasn't actually a dinosaur. It was SCP-137, a real toy. An entity capable of becoming a real version of any toy brought into its proximity. And on that day, one researcher had brought a plastic T-Rex to accompany the many other decorations on his desk. And in doing this, he provided the Foundation with its greatest hope, giving it its own anomalous dinosaur to fight against the invaders. And while the D-Rex was a formidable opponent, SCP-137, trying its best to embody the perfect child's vision of an unstoppable Rexy, the king of the dinosaurs, inevitably turned the tables. After a lengthy fight with blood drawn on both sides, the anomalous T-Rex stood over the corpse of the D-Rex. It held its head aloft and let out a long, explosive roar of victory. In this case, anomalous life just found a way. Now go check out SCP-682, Ways SCP Foundation Try to Kill Hard-to-Destroy Reptile, and SCP-044, World War II-era molecular fission cannon, for more.